Let me start off with the way that everybody is introduced to money. Whether you studied economics or not, I'm sure you got this story. I can remember when my daughter was in first grade, and she came to me and told me this story. And I said, well, actually, that's not quite right. She said, yes, it is, Daddy. This is what the teacher said. So you get it from a very young age. It begins with Barter. We've got Robinson Crusoe. He's shipwrecked. He meets Friday. Crusoe knows how to grow grain. Friday knows how to fish, so they barter. But this can be very inconvenient because it requires that on the day that Friday wants to deliver a fish, Crusoe actually wants a fish and he's willing to trade grain for it. So the story is that it requires a double coincidence of wants. So it's inconvenient. They search around for something to act as a medium of exchange. They might begin with seashells, but through some evolutionary process, they end up with gold, which has some nice characteristics that make it a very good medium of exchange. It's very valuable, it doesn't rot, and on and on and on. So this greatly reduces the transactions costs involved in barter. There is one problem with gold: it is extremely valuable. You got to worry about people who will try to take away your gold stock. So you start storing it with the goldsmiths. The goldsmiths already had that problem. They had to protect the gold stock that they're using to make jewelry. They have safes and so on, and so you would deposit your gold with a goldsmith. The goldsmith gives you a receipt. People discover that they actually can use those receipts in payments rather than using the gold, because individuals who accept them know that they can go get the gold out of the goldsmith's safe whenever they want. The goldsmith, in turn, realizes that he actually doesn't have to keep the gold in the safe. He only needs to keep a little bit because those receipts are not all going to come back on the same day. Okay, so he discovers what we now call the deposit expansion process. He can issue lots of receipts and hold just a little bit of gold, maybe 10%, for safekeeping to redeem on demand. Those goldsmiths become the banks. So that's the story. Okay, what is money in this view? I want to say something about the nature of money, and I'm going to contrast it with the MMT view. Money comes about to lubricate the market. It's more efficient than barter. Specific money-denominated assets fulfill that function, medium of exchange. Exactly which kinds of things fulfill that function changes over time. For a very long time, it supposedly was gold, okay, but gradually we have changed those money things that fulfill that function. But still today, the focus is on money as a medium of exchange. There are other functions that money serves, but those derive from the medium of exchange function. So medium of exchange is the most important function of money. Okay, what is wrong with this orthodox story? I know that I am being very quick explaining the dominant paradigm on money and banking. But what's wrong with it? First, there's actually no evidence of barter-based markets. And I don't know if any of you have read David Graeber's book. This was just a fantastic success, an unimaginable success. Debt the first 5,000 years. Everybody bought this book. Okay, it was a runaway bestseller. It's like 5,000 pages long. It's the kind of book everybody buys and probably hardly anybody reads, including me. I've got it on my shelf. Maybe when I retire, I'll finally get the time to read it. Okay, but what David shows is that when we look around the world, as far back as we go, you just do not find any economies anywhere based on barter. They just do not exist. Okay? And what we actually find when we look at history, and I knew this long before Graeber, is that money actually pre-exists markets. Money was not invented as a transactions cost minimizing device for markets that already existed. Money pre-exists markets. Okay? Money is as old as writing. How do we know that? The very first written records are all about money. Okay? Basically, writing was not invented by poets. It was invented by accountants to keep track of money values. All right? So money exists before markets, so there's something wrong with that part of the story. And even the Austrians who pushed for a very long time this barter story, they now admit that once you get beyond about 10 people and 10 different commodities, it's very hard for market higgling and haggling to settle on a single commodity that will serve as money. If you're talking about many commodities and many people involved, unless you add modern computing power, you're not going to select a single commodity to serve as your money commodity. And finally, from the very beginning, the evidence shows that authorities were always involved in the monetary system, in creating the monies of account. I'll come back to that. So authorities were always there. It wasn't Robinson Crusoe and Friday that invented money. It came out of the authorities. Another problem with the story is modern money has no intrinsic value. This is a little bit hard to explain when your whole story was about choosing a commodity that was very valuable that could serve as your money commodity. Okay? Today's monies are not attached to any commodities. They have no intrinsic values. And neither did ancient money, in spite of the goldsmith story. As far back as you go, the money things did not have intrinsic values, usually. Okay. There's an infinite regress problem. What people will do then is they say, well, yes, in the past it was gold that gave money value, but today it is trust. They ask them, well, what is the trust in the money? They say, well, I trust that Billy Bob will take it from me in payment. I trust I can go to the grocery store and someone will take it. Okay? In my view, that's a very thin argument to base the most important institution we have in modern economies, which is money, on trust. And also, there is no circular flow that can explain where the money comes from. How does it get into the economy? So I'm going to present an alternative. This is sort of. So, where did money come from? We do not know, and we will not know. Nobody sat down and wrote a memo, today I invented money and this is how I did it. We're not going to find that. Because money pre-existed writing. As I said, the first writing already is talking about money. So we're not going to know. We have to speculate. The most convincing speculating I've ever seen is done by the most famous coin collector in the world, beyond collecting, studied coins, was a guy named Philip Grierson at University of Cambridge in England. When he died, he donated all the coins, which were worth a fortune, to the University of Cambridge. He speculated that actually money came out of the ancient tribal practice that's called Wehrgeld. Now that was applied to the Germans. Roman society was civilized. Germany was still a tribal society. The Romans studied the German tribal society, so we know a lot about how it functioned. But anthropologists find that every tribal society they come across also has this Wehrgeld tradition. If you cause an injury to someone else, okay, here, whoops, killed the guy, a fine is imposed on you. And you have to pay a fine to the victim's family. Okay? These fines were in kind. It would depend on what the injury was. That would determine what you had to pay, whether it's a goat or a cow or a horse or sheep or chicken. Oh, as far back as there was tribal society and humans came out of tribal society, so it's as old as humans. Okay, when did they come up with the idea and why did they come up with it? We don't know when, but it's obvious why they did it. To stop blood feuds. Otherwise, you have the Hatfields and the McCoys killing each other. So this is to stop retribution. You had to pay a fine. So Grierson's notion was that the concept of valuing things came out of the Vergilde tradition. It was a huge jump because Vergilde, you pay a cow versus a chicken, depending on the damages you had done. Money allows you to compare those things. Oh, it takes 100 chickens value to equal 1 cow. He thinks that's where money came from. It's a big intellectual jump, bigger than any measuring jump we had ever done before, because the measurements before money always were length. What's the length? Foot. Whose foot? The king's foot. Okay? Or cubit and so on. Those are relatively easy. Now, a hint is that every ancient money unit was the name of a grain weight unit. Shekel, lira, pound, those are all weight units. They all came out of measuring grain. So someone had the idea, let's use the grain measurement in order to measure the value of everything. By Babylonian times, this is exactly what they did, and then the price list, the equivalents to the mina, which was a grain weight unit, was posted at the temple. That is how you knew the value of everything. It was set by the temple's authorities. I'll come back to religion because it's important for money. Okay, alternative, what is money?
Would you define money?
Yeah, I will. It is a state monopoly. It is a social unit of measurement. If you're in America, you can point to anything, you can ask people, what is that worth? They're not going to tell you in terms of chickens. They're going to tell you in terms of dollars. Almost everything can be valued in terms of dollars. Now, not quite everything, but as capitalism develops, a greater and greater range of things are measured in terms of money. It is a state money of account. Almost without exception, the money unit of account that we use comes from the state. Every time a new country is formed, it chooses its own money of account. Why did we get the dollar in the US? Because we didn't want the pound. Okay? We just revolted. We chose the dollar, and we modeled our currency after the Spanish currency to thumb our noses at England. Right? And then we have money records. There's a hierarchy of these IOUs denominated in the state money of account. There is bank money, okay, and there are your IOUs. They're all denominated in the US dollar in America. The form that they take depends on technology. I'll come back to this. Paper money, coin money, electronic money, that is just the technological way of recording. The tally sticks, the use of the currency and value of money are based on the power of the issuing authority, not on the intrinsic value. Okay? The currency does not have to have any intrinsic value. It's based on the power of the issuing authority. The currency itself is a record of debts, whether it's printed on paper or stamped on a coin. It's a record of a debt. It is a promise to redeem, and I'll say more about what redemption means. The state played the central role in the evolution of money from the very beginning. It always has played the central role. What we typically find when we look around the world today and we look back as far back as we can go, about 5,000 to 6,000 years into the past, what we find is the one state or one nation, one currency rule. Each nation or state has its own currency. When the Soviet Union falls apart, every one of the former members chooses its own currency. Okay? In the past, the exceptions to this rule were extremely small and virtually irrelevant. The Vatican State used the Italian lira. Okay? That was an exception, minor. The only major exception to this rule is Euroland. It was an experiment in an exception, and it's been disastrous. Okay? Before the euro, this is what we find. It's not a coincidence. It's tied up with sovereign power, political independence, and fiscal authority. This is why every new nation adopts its own currency. And finally, taxes drive money. Taxes are what gives value its money. It is the power to impose taxes that is the important sovereign power that ensures the currency has value.